know you needed, these first 4 games were big for confidence with the young team and everything, but how much did this point kind of feel like you were really going to find out what you
Yeah,
see?
I think, the games you have in the preseason, right? You try to, I think our philosophy was scheduling. I've always liked it over all the years. You can stack your schedule and just have a ton of wins, right? And just have a lot of, confidence and looking really great going into your big season or your conference season. But, when you try to do a conference and playing, some hard, scary teams, right? Obviously the Drakes, UNIs, those are always difficult emotionally. But then when you get a tournament where you have like some teams that obviously have some bigger, faster, stronger, this is when we'll start to see if the good points we've seen in each of these games. I think we've seen some really good minutes. We've seen some really good stretches of depth. We've seen some really good promise of our bigs, but we've also seen some inconsistency. We've also seen moments where it's a little bit off the rails. So now we'll be challenged with what's Baylor ranked 7th in the country, right? To see how we're going to stack up. So I'm ready for that. I think that's what's fun about a season is when you go, you have these little mile markers along the way that tell you nothing is won or lost in this next weekend, but it's sure going to tell us a lot.
Is there maybe a position group or a certain thing that, whether you win or lose, is there a certain thing that you want to see? You're really interested in seeing how it plays out against Baylor and Miami?
Yeah, I think, the game, I should clarify, nothing's won or lost. I meant the seasons, not won or lost, right? It's not going to be like, oh my gosh, if we beat Baylor, it's the greatest thing, or we don't beat it. It's just, I think I said yesterday too, we're a little bit like this. You look really good at times and you're just about ready to say yeah, and then it gets a little herky-jerky. And so going into this, I'd like to continue seeing our inside game just be a little bit more consistent. I think we've had some major, great performances. And then yesterday we were a little quiet, right? Aside from Layla, right? So I think that needs to be consistent because that's a lot of who we can be that is really tough to guard. Whether you can have Hannah and Ava in there at the same time, or Layla and Ava in there at the same time. But to do that needs to be a pretty consistent part of who we are. And it's been great moments at each game by a different person. But I think as we get going down this season, that's going to be a pretty major part of who we can be. So I'd like to see that starting to take a little bit more form. And I believe in it. I think it can. I just think we've had some moments. I'd like to see our overall shooting be a little bit more consistent, right? We've seen Evansville. I see it in practice every day. But that, I think, every coach in the country will tell you that, though. We want our shots to go in.
Defensively, what can you pick out of these first 4 games that you feel like is more significant than just, who you played and being better than them?
Yeah, I feel like we're pretty good attention to the initial defensive plan. I feel, and what I mean by that, for a young team, if we go in with that plan, if that's working, we're pretty true to it. The one thing is like switching it up. That's where I feel like that gets harder, because you can really practice. Let's say you're really going to practice showing on ball screens, and you're go, and then you go into a game and like, man, we're getting beat on the slip all the time. And then changing that's a little bit harder because we just haven't had the experience to switch it. But what I've seen is if they're really good at being attentive and trying to really focus on the principles that remain true, the gaps, the on ball, trying to put a little pressure on this person but not that person. So I think that's what I've really been liking to see, is that they are grasping that and they're believing in that. The tricky part is not yet. I think we'll get there. We just don't have the flexibility to throw a lot of different things. At times last year, Lucy Olson was able to do that, but she was a pretty experienced guard coming in, and she's long and she's lean, and you could do a lot of different things. But I think we're getting there.
First few games, chit chat has really been scoring wise, and I remember in the preseason you talked about wanting to really develop her scoring, because she was really pass first, and you wanted her to do a little bit more scoring. Has she really grown a lot just in practice, or you've seen her grow a lot in that area?
Yeah, I mean, very much. I thought yesterday that was one of our brightest spots. Is I thought she looked at the situation and it really wasn't as fluid. You know, people weren't quite as consistent. So then she's like, okay, I can take my person. I'm looking for the seams where I can get a look. And when someone gave her a kick out, she wasn't trying to drive it and throw it to someone else. She was like, okay, let me take this three. I thought that was big, and I think that's going to be huge for us, because what I've seen in practice is she's pretty doggone good at most every skill. Her floaters, getting to the rim. I mean, sometimes she's going to get whacked. I mean, she's small, but she just gets back up, and then she's not going to do that again, right? But she can, you know, she knows how to use that size, and I think that she has grown with that. There'll be times in practice, though, either myself or Coach Lysandra Barrett, we'll go over and be like, you don't have any shots in this 8 minutes. You need to do something about that. Okay. And then just boom. So I thought yesterday after I think maybe Lysandra, I don't think she shot much that first quarter. And it was a little jog of her memory, and she was like, all right. So that's going to be huge moving forward.
You look at Baylor, and I think their overall rotation has some inexperience, and they're trying to figure out some things. But their top three, I mean, it looks really good. I think they're averaging like 52 a game.
Yeah,
just as you watch the film last night, what about that top three kind of?
Well, they're just so. I mean, that Scott is something, right? She just is. I mean, she gets a bucket, and you go. Better not go under the screen. She's going to pull it, right? You chase her over the top. She's going to get to the rim, or she's going to got a pretty good mid-range game. So I think it starts with her averaging 25 points a game, 24.5. But then that Fauntleroy, I watched her a lot in high school. She's so good. I do like, we didn't five. Five just had a massive game, 13 for 15, or 14. I don't think she missed one. So they kind of have their big three. And a couple of those guys are seniors, Fauntleroy and Little Paige Bugs. So they got a lot of senior grit to them. And they do play some other kids off the bench, but those three, everybody else, they can do what they do, but we got to pay a lot of attention to those three. And Scott can really, she gets a rebound and she can go coast to coast. I think on their transition, they'll push through those two, but then they have a lot of really nice secondary actions. She does a really good job. She's really, of all the teams that I've recently scouted, she likes a lot of high wing, unique ball screens. Whether you're a step-up screen, which is kind of looks a little bit like a bottom-up, or there's a rail screen, but it's not exactly on the typical rail or in the typical wing. It's in this unique high grayer area. And she's got the kids to be able to utilize that. So that'll be interesting. We only have a couple days to prep for that. But she's a really good coach, but it's just a little interesting. Got some different twists, staggered ball screens with it. So we're gonna have to really get used to some new concepts there real quick. But that's been impressive what I see. Their secondary is a lot of actions, and then they go into a continuous ball screen, and that's perfect for them.
Is that a game where you say those three don't get off the floor much? Is that where you really try to stick the versatility, the depth?
Yeah, that's what I hope, right? That's the depth. What we've been doing in these games is trying to figure out what rotations play the best together, and who should be the first sub off the bench, and should this be person her first? Should that be the first at the off guard, or should she be the first at the small forward? So right now, after practice today, we'll kind of have a meeting about that. But I think the sweet spot is knowing how much and when to keep pushing all that depth, right? But if we can, that's what I'd like to do. But it has to remain consistent. I think, we just didn't have quite the consistency with that depth yesterday. But I think you and I did a great job, took us out of our flow early. They really milked that clock for 20 seconds, so you couldn't kind of get that energy going. So I hope the depth will pay a dividend, but I also want to be wise with it, and now we have to kind of tighten that a little bit because we don't have enough. I mean, I don't anticipate having a cushion of which you can really try to put different combinations together. We're going to have to go with the data that we have. So you might not see all of that type of depth coming in for as long of minutes.
Yeah, you talk about towards the bottom of the rotation, Teagan, Journey. You're talking about 11 players potentially that could be in a rotation. Just, you start playing Baylor and Miami and some of the other tough games where generally coaches go with 8 or 9 players. Is that one of those where if you do constrict to 8 or 9, it could go game by game on who those two players
really
are?
Could, because Journey and Teagan are such different players, what they can bring, right? And Teagan had a tougher shooting game yesterday, but she's really been showing. I mean, high school she was a great shooter. We didn't see it as much last year, but she's really been great in practice. She's been out. She's been out a lot. With her the ankle injury, she had a concussion. She's had some other issues with her throat, so she hasn't quite got that rhythm. I was hoping yesterday she could have kind of got that rhythm, but unfortunately we didn't quite see that. But that's where I think the potential of this team lies, is if I keep talking about passing that baton, because it may not be your matchup this game. And sometimes when you have a team that doesn't have a lot of depth, it's gotta be your matchup. If you're Kylie and you've got to guard a 6'3" post player, right? Well, we don't have to do that as much this year if we can have it's Emily, if she can go in and push him off the block. So we just have to, I think, really continue to embrace that. I love what I've seen so far, but now we're going to start playing all these different people that do a lot. And then after the Baylor game, we play Miami, and they full court press like crazy. So then you're a little limited. Now you got to go with the people who are more comfortable and confident handling the ball. Because if you can't get it past half court, it doesn't matter what your counter is going to be down there. First and foremost, you've got to secure the ball with the break. And I think we have a pretty good break lineup so far, but you never know against your gray squad or your men's squad. You only know when you get, when the lights are on.
Before you get this whole team, I know you said that they've handled kind of the passing the baton thing, but until they've kind of fully grasped it, is that one of the things where maybe you go to a certain player and say, hey, this matchup probably doesn't really work for you tonight, and then but listen, our next opponent does work for you, just so they know.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. When I definitely know that. Sometimes it's like I think, and then I put them in the game, and I'm not so sure, but maybe it's a freshman and they get a little frazzled. So then I don't want to all of a sudden tell, hey, Teagan, you're not playing this game. So it just kind of depends on the moment and the matchup and kind of my gut. Usually I tell them all, they all have to stay ready. But if hey, let's just say Kylie, just got to have her on the floor because there's 3 amazing offensive players and we got to have our best defender on the floor at all times. Then it's a little bit remember this game, Kylie's she's gonna get breathers only, and I think that the team gets that, right? Because we want to win and we understand that she's our defensive captain and all things. So yes, when I feel confident that will help, but if I'm not confident exactly what's going to play out, then I just kind of let it ride out, because I think that's part of this new culture. I just think part of it want to sound like back in the 50s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll were bad. The older I get in this profession, but I feel like this new era of the greatness of sports is sometimes we want to take the adversity out of college athletics. It's we just, no one, it's a rough spot. Why? It's well, they should be playing, or, you can transfer 20 times or if you want to, or whatever. Is part of that is growing and handling that. And, there's just few that come in and, start right away and play 40 minutes, So I think that's the part, the beautiful part of coaching when you can get to that point. And I'm really happy at this point. I think our players, they're really good at being uncomfortable. And it's hard. It's not fun when you don't play all the minutes, and every coach will tell you that. But I think this day and age is just hard to get through adversity, because all of them are good when they come in, but this new wave of what we have, it's hard to feel not so good, right? But I commend our players. They really love each other. I think they believe in the system. but it's not easy because there's a lot of pressures from the outside that kind of sometimes make it harder to handle that adversity. But I think adversity is such a crucial part of any growth. And, you know, my hope is always that even through that they grow, they can feel it and they can sense it and they know they're becoming better because of it.